Hey, what's up guys? My name is Moda and welcome back to the Mining Stacker YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to do a pretty in-depth look at the IceRiver AL3 and the Bitmain AL1, which are the Alephium, specifically the big boy ASICs, because that's kind of what I have my focus on the most. Gonna do something a little bit different than our typical general overviews. This is more specific to me. This is going to be specifically the risk factors I am most concerned with, what I am kind of looking at the most, and just how I value this thing, right? Like, why is this guy still on the short list of ASICs that I'm still looking at, right? So we're going to talk about it pretty in depth. We'll look at different things, different scenarios. We'll look at worst case scenarios, best case scenarios, and kind of just talk about it, right? So if that sounds good, guys, stay tuned. Let's get right to this thing. So this is one been getting a lot of questions about, and then also just me in general. This is one I'm still like struggling with pulling the trigger knot, right? Out of most of the big boy ASICs, this is the one that I have my eye on probably the most currently, right? It's between this one. Initially it was script ASICs, right? But essentially I'm not super interested in getting in one after this pump. Maybe if things retrace, something happens, which I highly doubt, maybe we'll revisit that one. But for me, that train has kind of ran. I'm not interested in paying double for something. But this is still one that is still early, still has potential. A lot of potential actually, and just one I'm bullish on, right? So a lot of this perspective is going to be more personalized. It's more specific to me, but I'm going to explain as to why I'm interested, okay? So AL3, 15 terahash, 3,500 watts. Current profitability is $38 a day in revenue. At a 10-cent kilowatt hour, your electric is about $8.40. Therefore, your profit's about $30 a day currently. Okay, which in reality, as you guys know, I don't care about current fiat profitability because I'm not going to be selling now, right? I'm not going to be selling until quite a ways into the coming year. So what I'm concerned with is the yield, okay? Currently, yield is about 21 Alph a day. That's what I'm concerned with, and that's what I kind of value, right? So the way I look at things, I tend to make a price prediction of where I think the price will eventually be sometime in the coming year. Whether or not that's a peak, whether it's not, it's more like I think it'll at least reach that point, right? And then kind of based off of that, which is based off of previous history, previous market caps, where it can go, how high is it, how big is it already, what are comparable scenarios that have happened in the past, right? So there's a lot that kind of goes into it. My numbers, though, aren't necessarily the moon boy numbers. I'm very conservative with my estimates, right? So it kind of gives me high confidence that I'll at least reach that point, right? And I base kind of everything based off of that. Will it reach that point? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it struggles and only reaches half that point. That's also scenarios you got to consider here, okay? So, for example, in my scenario, the way I see it, it's currently about 20 Alph a day. So I'm valuing my Alph at about $10 an Alph. Okay, is it a number that's going to hit for sure? We don't know. It's purely theoretical, but I'll kind of go into it at the end why I think fairly confident that it'll at least hit that number. Okay, so for me, $200 a day, extremely appealing, but what are some of the basic risk factors here? Number one, for me, the biggest threat is the hash rate. Okay, it is a very immature network, very similar to the early Casper days, where it's going to continue to go up whether you like it or not, right? Kind of your best bet here is that if Alephium were to struggle, were to retrace for a little bit or for an extended period of time, therefore allowing you to stack without a lot of people being super interested in this thing. The reason I'm saying that is because this thing does pump kind of prematurely or like early. If it does go to $3, $4, $5 in these next few months, which is totally possible, what's going to happen? Okay, this profitability is going to go through the roof, right? Even if it just goes to, let's say it doubles, goes to $3.60, which isn't unheard of because in case you haven't looked at your altcoin portfolio, a lot of things 2 and 3x within this past few weeks. Okay, so it's definitely not something that's out of the realm of possibility. But if that were to happen, right, let's say it goes up to $4, this is now making $80 a day minus your electric, so $72 a day profit. What do you think is going to happen to the price? Right, you think this guy is going to stay at $3,800, right, which is down here. I know we have the AL1 listed, but it's down here at $3,800. You think he's going to stay at that price? Hell to the no. So that's why one risk factor on top of everything else is just the price going up if Alephium pumps here in the short term. Okay, we saw how fast they went up with script ASICs. It's going to happen with all of them. Okay. So now more on the yield. So we've broken this down in the past. We're just going to run through it quickly. It only is going to take 2,000 units for this thing to double and your yield to get cut in half. Okay, we know that this batch with this price reduction might be somewhat hefty. I'm ballparking it at about 2,000 units, right? Could be significantly less, could be significantly more. We don't know, but I think 2,000 is a fairly fair number. Again, it's only going to take those 2,000 units to also double the hash rate and therefore have your yields. So personally, I would be looking at it already having this. Okay, by the time you get this thing, if you were to order, which people are going to get it sometime January, somewhere in that park, for this to potentially go down as low as like 10 to 11 Alph per day, which currently at a nearly $2 Alph, still 20 bucks a day minus your electric, about 12 bucks a day profitability. The reason that's not a bad thing, especially if it stays like that for a while, is it's not going to be super appealing for people. Okay, so that's kind of your best case scenario here, that you're able to stack for an extended period of time. Okay, because if this thing does moon, if it does go to, let's say in these next 3 months, it does go to $8, $10, $15, $20, the hash rate's going to go ballistic, right? In a sense, that's almost kind of a worst case scenario, because again, it is a very immature network. This thing has a ton of room to grow, just like Caspa did. Okay, it's not out of the realm of possibility that in these next 6 months, this thing is at 500 petahash, okay, or even higher, right? It's crazy, right? There's a lot of room to grow there, okay? So those are some of the risk factors. To me, the most grave, though, being this, right? Another one to factor in is pricing. So this guy, the IceRiver unit's $3,800. Bitmain has not adjusted their price to compete with this guy. So it is totally possible for them to do just like they did with the Caspa ASICs, to undercut that IceRiver price and make it available spot. Okay, so do not be surprised that if you order the AL3 right now, 2 days later, Bitmain drops a bomb and it goes down to $2,200. And then IceRiver responds for their next batch and brings it down to $1,800, right? That is also a possible scenario. Okay, you have to factor that possibility in almost for sure. Is it going to play out? Not super likely, just because of Alephium's price point, but again, we didn't think that the K3 or the K5 would go down as aggressively either. Okay, so make sure you understand those factors. Another factor, this is a personal thing. This isn't necessarily not a whole lot of credence other than the past with the CAS basics. Seemed extremely weird that both the AL1 and AL3 released around the same time at the same efficiency, when we know that typically Bitmain is a generation ahead on these core intensive algos. Okay, so do not be surprised for their AL2 from Bitmain to release not too long after. Maybe not soon though, because again, they still have to get rid of this stock. They're not going to cannibalize this stock. They're going to reduce that price most likely, sell out what they can, and it's potential that the next one comes out. Okay, again, is that super likely? No. Is it possible though? Another possibility, right? So have to factor that in. And how that's going to affect you is, again, the hash rate and difficulty continuing to go up even faster. Okay, but again, that's going to be based off of its price, because again, if the price stays stagnant, it's going to be super profitable. So even if it is this crazy powerful unit, if not that many people are purchasing it, then this is not going to go up as aggressively. Okay, again, at the end of the day, it's yield, what we're worried about. But these are scenarios you got to consider, right? Another thing to consider here are the emissions for Alephium. Okay, they do have quite a few weird dynamics in play. It's nothing as aggressive, though, as Caspa with their 6% monthly emissions reductions. Okay, to me, the biggest threat still is this, because it's such a huge unknown. Right? Again, it could be 2,000 units, could be 20,000 units. We don't freaking know. So just to be aware of, though, proof of less work doesn't kick in until it hits 1 exahash, which is going to drastically change things. But realistically, I don't see us hitting that potentially until maybe after the peak, right? So in a sense, I'm more concerned with what's going to happen these next 6 months, 6 to 8 months. That's where the majority of your yield, therefore your profit, is going to be had, right? So that's what I'm more concerned with. The other factors to consider are their block rewards and how they do reduce, right? It's kind of complicated. It's pretty confusing, actually. So the mining reward is bound by 2 curves based on hash rate and time step. So time step is the amount of time from the beginning. As time goes on, it does further drop. Over 4 years, the time-based mining rewards drops gradually from 15 Alph shared by 16 chains per block period, although it's now down to 4 seconds, I believe, to 5 Alph. Or did it drop from 64 to 16? Yeah, regardless. Let's continue down. So this is the one that's more prevalent because this is the one that's also going to take into account, and this one might affect us here. So when the hash rate is within 1 petahash to 1 exahash, which it currently is, right? We are at about 30 petahash currently. The hash rate base gradually decreases from 15 Alph to 5 Alph per block period, right? So if this thing were to be linear, we'd go from 15 Alph down to about 10 Alph halfway through, so at the 500 petahash range, which is still quite a ways away also, right? So these are things to be concerned with eventually over time, but again, my biggest concern would just be the overall current hash rate and difficulty, right? This, to me, I think is going to be the bigger, more drastic factor, at least in the short term. Okay, so that would be more of my concern there. So those are a lot of the risk factors. Let's look at some of the benefits. One of them, a lot of people are saying Alph in mining terms, not necessarily comparing the projects, but in mining terms, it's going to be the next Kadena, and that it's going to be a pump and dump from these ASIC manufacturers. The reason I've been saying I kind of hope it is the next Kadena in that term is because that's kind of the best case scenario, right? If we look at the one that people tend to mention the most, and this is prior to RPMs. RPM, he got in on the IB Link unit, the BMK one, which came out actually way before this. The one people tend to reference, or the one people confuse with like the KA3, is actually the KD5. So the KD5 came out March 2021, which is well before the pump, right? The pump was in November 2021. Back in March 2021, it was at about 30 cents, right? And you can see it was down at this low period for an extended period of time, right? Therefore, giving the people who got this thing fairly cheap a ton of time to stack. So the people who made out the best here weren't the people that were now paying 50K for this thing around this time when Kadena started going crazy. It was the people who bought it when nobody wanted it, when things were going sideways. And as a matter of fact, if you look at specifically what happened, in March 2021, it was about 35 cents. It did have a little ASIC pump. Okay, if you look at that little tiny blip now, a month later, it went up to $1.52. So it did go up freaking like 5x from at that point. Okay, so it did retrace though, did go down to under $1 not too long after. And then after May, it really went down, kind of with the rest of the market during that time, down to a low of like in the 30-cent range. So again, people, I'm sure, felt like they got gypped because they bought it. And a month later, they were looking really good. And then, 4 months down the road, it went down 80%. Right? But again, the people who just stayed with it and just kept stacking, made out extremely well in the end during this run. So this is a thing to factor in, that this is possible. It is going to be extremely, extremely hard to time this exact top. Right? Realistically, getting anywhere near here, though, you're going to be doing well, especially, again, if you purchase it back here when the yield was excellent. Again, it was making, each KDA was worth about 30 cents. Even if you sold back here all the way like towards the end of January at $5, that's still like a 20x from that time frame. Okay, so there's still a lot of potential to be had here. So that's why I was saying, if it does do a pull a Kadena, that's our best case scenario, right? It remains stagnant for a long period of time and then has this massive run-up, right? Everybody relates this run-up to being an ASIC run-up, which isn't true because, for example, the Bitmain unit, the KA3, didn't come out until way later. It wasn't announced until September 22. Okay, this is when they got announced, not during this time. Okay, and as a matter of fact, even the KD6 came out after the peak. Okay, again, the people who made out were the people who got it prior to that run-up. Okay, those are the people that made out well because they got to stack this entire time, and then they sold that thing for 40, 50K up here. The people who got asked out, though, are the people who paid the 50K during this range and it just dropped drastically. Or the people who, again, also paid 50K here and it just dropped drastically again. Those are the people who got wrecked, which is unfortunately the majority of how you guys, when you're arguing in the comments, like, oh, the profitability doesn't make sense. This is what you're setting yourself up when you're looking at that. Okay, again, the name of the game over and over, cycle after cycle, ASIC after ASIC, is get in when it's boring, stack that yield, and then sell it during these times. You're not going to hit this top. Some of you will. The majority won't. But even if you sell anywhere up here, you start taking profits here, here, you missed the top and now it's going down like, oh, okay, I'm going to take some more. Now take some more. You're still doing extremely well. Okay, this is the success in ASIC mining. It's buying these ASICs and mining on these ASICs when your ROI time is 20 years or ROI never. Those are the people who kind of succeed here. Now, it's a big gamble, though. Like we've mentioned over and over, it is a degen play to do this. Because at the same time, you can be sitting here mining during this whole time, wasting all that electric, wasting the price of the unit, and this thing rugs or this thing doesn't do a damn thing. That is also totally possible, right? Mining is extremely risky. Okay, and then on top of that, the risk factors with the ASIC itself. Maybe you get a dud, maybe you have warranty issues. A lot of things can happen here. Okay, but again, if you play it right, you take that risk, there's a lot of rewards also. And I get it, a lot of this is theoretical, a lot of it's moon math, like, oh man, we don't know if it's gonna... I didn't know that was gonna hit with any of the ASICs we've had, and so far, it's been extremely successful. Okay, so it's risk to reward, you gotta risk it for the biscuit. This is not something that's guaranteed, but if it works out, the risk reward makes sense, it's something that can do extremely well. Okay. So that's that comparison. So let's give more credence to this potential at least $10 Alephium. My biggest comparison for a lot of these proof of work projects is Ravencoin, right? What Ravencoin did in previous cycles. If we go to the all-time chart, let's look at their market cap. What did their market cap hit in the peak? Okay, 1.82 billion. Ravencoin doesn't do a whole lot. It is a proof of work project that's pretty much propped up from the miners. It's here, it runs, it does its cycles, and it makes money, right? So just even basing it off of this, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that Alephium could hit $1 billion market cap, right? Even comparing it to Kadena, right? We're saying, oh, it could be the next Kadena. This is why we're bullish on it. Kadena hit a $3.5 billion market cap with arguably a lot less tech and a lot less potential than Alephium. Okay, so... not saying in terms of comparing, oh, Kadena's better than Alephium or vice versa. They're doing completely different things now. If you haven't kept up with Kadena, they are heavy on the institutional front now, right? So not even comparing that. We're just comparing metrics, market caps, and such, right? I don't think it's necessarily going to do as well as Kadena as far in terms of making it into the top 50. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Again, I'm more conservative. But basing on the fact that Kadena hit a $3.5 billion, Ravencoin hit 1.8 billion. I don't think it's unreasonable to think, considering what Alephium is done, what it's doing, for it to hit $1 billion market cap, right? If it were to hit $1 billion market cap, again, this is the coin perspective, is just a site that helps you compare different market caps, right? You can do a direct comparison with a coin in certain time, or you could just mess with the market cap, right? It's just an easier way to visualize it. So even if it just hits $1 billion, that would bring you to a $10.95 Alephium. Okay, which to me, considering we're expecting that the overall market cap in crypto as a whole will potentially do a 2 to 3x from where it was previously, I think it's totally doable. I don't think it's something that's like, oh, that's Moonboy math, oh, that's this and that. Even if it struggles, even if it ends up being somewhat mediocre, I think $1 billion is still definitely a reasonable target. Okay, so this isn't going to be exact though. Again, when you're looking at market caps and such, you also have to take into account the amount of coins that will be in circulation during that time also. So realistically, you can calculate how many more coins will be in the next 12 months, add that on there, and that'll give you a more precise number. Again, we're ballparking, right? To me, it doesn't make sense to spend all that time on the specifics when we're doing more generalized ranges. So let's go even more bullish. Let's say it goes beyond that. Let's say it hits a $2 billion market cap, which to me isn't unreasonable. It is also still possible, and that's something that probably will bring you into the top like 200 range, right? Totally possible. As a matter of fact, Alephium had already been there when it was in that $4 range. That would bring you to about a $20 Alph. Okay, so let's go back to the $1 billion, right? The $10 Alph, and that's why this thing could still make sense even after all these risk factors. Okay, currently as it is, $10 Alph, that'd be like making $200 an Alph. This, again, I wouldn't factor this in. I would already have this, taking into account this potential batch. So let's say it goes down to 10 Alph, we go sideways for a while, doesn't really increase a ton from there. It's like you're making about $100 a day, right? Realistically, if you're making $100 a day, even if that only lasts for a month, It's $3,000, right? This is a $4,000 ASIC. Risk to reward. Let's say Alephium goes batshit crazy, goes up to $7 within these next 4 months, causing the hash rate to moon. Let's say now you're making only 5 Alph a day. If you're valuing that Alph at $10 an Alph sometime next year, still $50 a day. 2.5 Alph, still $25 a day. Something you got to factor in, right? Is that likely to happen? I believe so. I can fully see sometime between now, these next 8 to 10 months, that this thing will probably only be yielding under 2 Alph a day. Okay, so that's why, like, what I'm concerned with is stacking right now prior to those run-ups, prior to that run-up of not only the price, but the hash rate and difficulty of this thing. So that's why I'm saying, like, yes, there are other things to take into account in the future. I'm concerned with these next 6 months because that's when you're going to make the bulk of your money. Okay, and that's been the name of the game with all these things. Just like any of the GPU mineable coins, any of these ASICs, the most profitable time to mine were those 2 years ago when nobody wanted it, when the yield is 5x of what it is currently. Okay, and like the case with like the K7, for example, the yield 2 years ago was actually around that much more. It was around 5 times more than what it is now. Okay, by holding those coins, those were the most profitable times. Like those first 12 months of ownership of that K7 are going to be more profitable than somebody buying one now and holding it for the next 4 or 5 years. That's the difference between mining in the bear market with yield versus mining in the bull when a lot more people want it. And right now, it's not the most appealing thing in the world. Imagine if CKB does go up to these bull market numbers. Okay, it's going to get even more ridiculous. But again, that's kind of the mind frame, right? That's what we've learned this entire bear market. That's what we've seen over and over. And there's still potential here, right? So kind of to each their own, because I know in the comments already, I already had it in the other video, oh, just buy the coin. And yes, that also is a strategy, which is something I did recently when it hit $1.10. I did fulfill most of the rest of my goal amount. So you can do both, guys. Like, take advantage of the scenarios. Again, the advantage with the ASIC, especially if you're running it as a business, is for that write-off purpose, especially next year, as a lot of us are going to be taking extreme profits. You need to offset that as much as possible, right? So there's a lot of benefits beyond the thing, even just like hardware arbitrage. Like, shout out to a lot of you guys who ordered multiple of the L9s. I know there's been quite a few of you guys who freaking big-brained it, ordered 2 of them, with the intention of, because again, the price is doubled for those of you guys who got in the $8,000 November batch. If you order 2 of them, hang on to one of them, sell one of them at now the $15,000, $16,000 price point, and now you got a freaking L9 for free. Therefore, getting rid of all the ROI risk and all that, and you're just freaking stacking, right? Because again, the ASICs are also assets, especially if you buy the right ones. The hard part is we don't know which ones are going to be the best, which ones are going to move the fastest. Because at the end of the day, the number one question I get is, oh, which ASIC is more profitable? Which one is the best? Which one do you recommend? At the end of the day, it's the one that mines the coin that appreciates the most. Which one it's going to be, we don't freaking know, right? Could be this guy. Alephium goes to $40. Maybe it's this one. Maybe it's the Kadena ASIC. Maybe Kadena goes back up to $25. Maybe it's that one. Maybe it's CKB. Maybe it's some other shit coin. Maybe it's freaking Sia coin does something crazy. SCP. Who freaking knows, right? You're kind of placing those bets. So it's kind of a degen factor, especially if you're doing those things. Again, a lot of things to consider here, but it's very complicated. Again, it's not as simple as going on mining now, look at the profitability and basing it off of that. Way more than that, right? So many more strategies to maximize potential earnings here. That's the way I look at things. That's all the scenarios that run through my head whenever I'm considering purchasing an ASIC, right? So kind of teach their own, but that's why it's important that you devise your own strategy, what makes the most sense to you. Like, I value certain things that other people don't, right? And vice versa, right? There's different data points. Everybody sees things differently. Everybody has different strategies. I personally mine and hodl 100%. Some people mine and pay the electric out of pocket, which again, in the bear market is a losing strategy, because if the ASIC you're doing that with mines $9 with a certain coin and you're paying $8 in electric, you're only yielding $1 with the coin. buy the damn coin, right? So it only makes sense, in my opinion, for the max amount of gains to just mine and hold whatever you can. Pay whatever you can out of pocket, whether it's one ASIC, multiple ASICs, or one GPU, whatever it is. That to me has been a game-changing strategy that has been proven over and over and over, right? So let me know, guys, what do you guys think? Is this one you guys are still eyeing also, or are you guys completely done with ASICs? Did you guys have PTSD from all the Caspa ASICs and you're done? I don't blame you either, and I think that's part of the reason that there's not a ton of hype with this guy, just because a lot of people fell for the trap with the KE3, they fell for it with the KE5, they fell for it with the AL1. These are the things we got to look for, but again, when these prices hit these kind of points, because again, the AL1 is an equivalent unit, was at 30K. Now it's down at this price point, which again, risk to reward, even if it goes down half, $3,800 to $2,000 is not the biggest deal. 30K to $3,700, God bless your soul, right? But let me know in the comments, guys. What do you guys think? Is this something you're still eyeing, or are you guys done? I know I'm for the most part pretty much done. I'm still kind of back and forth on this one, just because a lot of the different risk factors, I'm personally still kind of waiting, which again, in reality, is a dumb thing to do if the market continues this route, right? So might be worth waiting, might be not. Something you got to decide, right? Risk to reward. Got to consider all the risk factors. But again, let me know in the comments, guys. Please comment, like, and subscribe, guys. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I am out.